Hello, good afternoon, and welcome. I am Terry Kay of the Jewish Grandparents Network. Thank you for joining us today for Grandparents and Jewish Early Childhood Programs, partners in building Jewish family life. We so appreciate that you made the time to join us this afternoon. First, a big thank you to Sarah Reed, our JGN colleague, who is helping facilitate. Sarah has shared with us in chat how to turn on captions for those who wish to use this feature. Today, we are absolutely thrilled to welcome Sasha Kopp, who will lead us today. Sasha is a Jewish educator and community builder, passionate about fostering meaningful connections and lifelong Jewish engagement. Based in Boston, Sasha serves as the Senior Director of Education and Engagement at Elevated, where she strengthens the field of early childhood Jewish education through mentorship, creativity, and play. Sasha holds a bachelor's degree in sociology and education studies from Brandeis University and dual master's degrees in Jewish education and nonprofit management from Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion. Sasha, over to you with all our thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Terry and Sarah, and thank you to the Jewish Grandparents Network for bringing me in today. It's wonderful to be with you all. We are going to get to explore today what learning looks like for our youngest children, our early childhood students, ages birth through 5. So I want to get us all into the mindset of thinking about those little learners, and to first take a moment to think of your first Jewish memory. When was it? How old were you? It was probably a while ago, could take place in a home or at a school, but we'd love to have your first Jewish memory in the chat, and a few of you we also might unmute as well. Thanks, Sarah, for putting the Elevated website in the chat as well. Does anyone have a memory that just pops to the top of your mind while others are thinking? We have Shabbat dinner with your family every week. Thank you, Emily. Emily, do you want to unmute and say what about dinner you remember?
For me, it's very much the actual food, but it was the sense of every Friday night, I knew I was going to be sitting around the table with my family, eating some sort of chicken, some sort of rice, and some sort of vegetable. And now to this day, the food, eating that exact food brings back those same childhood memories of sitting. Also, Diet Peach Snapple goes right along with it. For some reason, my mom went through a Diet Peach Snapple phase.
I love that. I also see Passover Seder. And I think about kind of the consistency, the order of Shabbat, like the order of Seder. It's the same food every year. You know who's going to be there every year. And children love that structure. They love to know what to expect. And Jewish tradition offers that opportunity to be able to create that structure with them. And then it becomes ingrained in us. It becomes part of who we are and how we think about Jewish tradition. Some more Passover Seders are coming in. Let's hear one more voice. Anyone else want to share? Veronica, I'll pick on you. The blue and white for Shabbat, and I don't know, was it also Yom Ha'atzmaut?
Hi. No, actually, every single Friday, wear white and blue for Shabbat to go to school. I mean, I went to a Jewish day school. And I could couple that with my grandparents because a few times in the year, my grandparents were invited to some type of event at the school. And that was like, it was like the sun was shining bright that day.
It's so special to have your loved ones in your school and for grandparents to be invited in and to be able to have your grandparents meet your friends and your friends' grandparents meet their grandparents, like schools that have that opportunity. It's so great to have grandparents come in. Okay, so let's get started. Thank you for these ideas, and I hope that you continue to think about this as we dive in more. So here, great. So a little bit about me. I started this work in early childhood because I became an aunt at the age of 4.5. Here you see me with my father, and my father is a grandfather, here with my oldest nephew in his arms. And I grew up in the house of grandparents, constantly with kids coming in and out. I always was the one to like set up a little table in the corner of the Passover Seder or to organize a craft for Thanksgiving. That was my role in the family. I was only 4.5 years older than my nephew, so here I am at 5. So I got to watch firsthand how how my parents as grandparents brought Jewish life and brought connection to our family. And for me, it's part of how I ended up in the world of early childhood. Um, so I just want to share this with you. And I have been immersed in the early childhood world really since this age. I babysat all through high school. I connected to kids through my synagogue. I was a religious school teacher. And then I started teaching early childhood as a student at Brandeis. I taught all 4 years of college and 3 years afterwards. And I have not stopped teaching early childhood since. And now I work at a national level, connecting with schools, connecting with educators, and trying to see what we can do as a community to open our doors to our youngest students and our youngest families to create more connection, to create more community, and to bring people together. And I think that the grandparents' role in this larger conversation is so essential, and how we think about each stage of our lives as Jewish people and as Jewish people wanting to connect with others is really important. So I'm excited to be able to be here with you and share a little more about the early childhood landscape and ways that you can connect more to it. So our plan today, we've done a little welcome and introduction. We're going to talk a little bit about how parents make decisions for where they choose to send their kids, and really kind of the goals of what early childhood is and why is it important, both in our Jewish context and in a secular context. I'm going to dive into something I care a lot about, which is the Reggio philosophy and the Montessori philosophy. These might be new terms to you, and we're going to kind of do an overview of both of them together, and then bringing early childhood into the home, engaging with early childhood programs, and then conclusions and next steps. So when I say early childhood Jewish education, what do I mean? I mean full day care. It could be part-time care, full day care. It's not like a touch Shabbat that happens on Fridays or on Saturday mornings for an hour to synagogue. This is where children go to school. This is what childcare looks like for young children. It can be at a JCC, at a synagogue. Sometimes they're at day schools or at Chabad's or independent. They can serve both as education, and some people call them daycare. And daycare happens in our Jewish settings. Our youngest learners start at birth. At 6 or 12 weeks, young babies can go to the JCC for childcare. That is part of what early childhood education is. And it really is an entry point for Jewish life, for the child, for the family, and the extended family to be able to engage in new conversations. So I want to take a second and bring a few questions to you. I'm curious how many of I'm going to put these in the chat right now. How many of your grandchildren go to Jewish early childhood? What are you noticing about their experiences? And what is different about your grandchildren's experiences from your children's experiences? So I'm going to stop sharing and we can explore those questions together. So first, let's do a raise of hands. How many of you have young grandchildren who are in early childhood centers or in Jewish early childhood centers? Great. So we have, how many of you have young grandchildren in any early childhood center? So we got some more. So we have a diverse group in terms of that. What are you noticing about those experiences? What stands out to you? Let's have a few voices, but also if you would prefer to put in the chat, feel free.
My grandchildren are in a reform in Tampa, Florida, and they what I've noticed is that they don't always cover the Jewish holidays like Tu B'Shvat. I don't even know. I guess they're going to do Purim, or if they do it, it's in such a bypass. You know, they're not concentrating on anything. They're just they're mentioning it in passing. And I can't believe I come from an Orthodox background, so I was confused about that. I mean, what about Tu B'Shvat?
Yeah.
What about Shavuos? What about these, other holidays? And I guess I'm a little naive. I don't know the reform curriculum. I looked at the curriculum and it's supposed to be, what is it called? Universal. So they'll have Black, and that's all good, but not to fully cover the Jewish confused me. And I did say something, so I got into trouble.
Well, I think that's a really important question to ask. And I think it's something that we notice across the country in different ways. One thing I do want to say is I don't think that one Reform synagogue is indicative of the Reform movement. And I think what it is indicative of who are the teachers in Tampa, Florida, who they can hire to work in early childhood settings. If you were in a different Jewish community with more communal support for Jewish life, there might be more infusion. I know we have a lot of different national leaders on this call from the JCC Association, from the Jewish Education Project, who work in local communities to support, national communities to support the entities of their school. So I think that that's an important noticing. And I think what that's actually indicative of is trends in who teachers are and not trends of the Reform outlook on how to teach Jewish holidays or which holiday should be taught. Other noticings. Meredith.
Hi. So three of my seven grandchildren one is at a JCC daycare in New Jersey, and two of them are at a synagogue in Newton, Massachusetts. And my reaction is I am incredibly grateful to these educators in schools who are teaching our grandchildren about Jewish traditions and holidays. The one in New Jersey, my daughter-in-law, it's my son's daughter. My daughter-in-law is not Jewish. And this child is so well informed about Judaism and Jewish traditions. I think it's incredible. So I'm having a very different experience.
I think that that's really interesting. And we see that about 50% of our families at Jewish early childhood centers have a parent that's not Jewish. And they learn so much about Judaism through the songs, through the projects, through the curriculum. And I think that that's one way that this opportunity really kind of infuses in families, because we want to have welcoming centers that embrace all children and all families to be able to make them feel comfortable. Where in Newton is your other grandchild? Oh, you're off. You're on mute now. Sorry. Put it in the chat and we'll continue. Thanks, Meredith. And then we'll go to Nancy.
Hi. Our grandchildren are from a mixed marriage, but they are going to a temple-based preschool. And what we notice is their joy of Shabbat. It's actually really lovely, making challah every Friday. And the service is lovely that they have. They just had a grandparents' day that we got to go. And in fact, we had Shabbat dinner at our house one night, and the little one, the 3-year-old, sang the prayers. He knew all the words, and it was just beautiful to see.
It's amazing what young children are capable of. And they might not even know what prayer is, but they know this song, they know these words, yes, and they repeat it, and they know it's a special time. Even sometimes before children can talk, they know to cover their eyes when you light the candles, and that they can do that, which is a really sweet moment to see. One more, Karen, and then we'll go back to the presentation. Thank you.
Hi there, thanks. So I and my 3 children all happily identify as Jewish, and all 4 of us are married to non-Jews. So my 4 grandchildren are all in secular daycare, but the 2 older ones, who are now in 2 different families, 4 and about to be 3, will likely go to Catholic preschools. And I really credit both families with having very strong commitment to both sides of the family's traditions within the house. So even though now it's secular, they do Hanukkah every night with great joy. We don't do all the minor Jewish holidays, but neither did we. So my kids grew up with Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Passover and Hanukkah probably. And they're continuing that. So it's interesting to listen to everyone and to your expertise, because they won't be going to Jewish preschool, but I think I like that they are committed to doing it at home and they involve me. And I live in another country from them, but they involve me and we light the candles together on FaceTime and all those good things. So a little different situation.
Yeah, and it's so special to bring in a tradition and to be able to hold multiple ways of being in family and in connected in community, no matter how many different people are identifying as Jewish, are learning about other traditions as well, and it's coming into a house in different ways. It's really beautiful and doesn't negate that they are doing these beautiful Jewish things as well. That's really great. And Carrie, and then I'm going to go Carrie Leaf, and then I'll hop back to my presentation.
So I'm having yet a slightly different example. My grandson, who lives outside of Maryland in Ellicott City, is in a non-Jewish daycare center. And what I'm seeing, as opposed to my daughter, who was raised in our congregational preschool, and is that he's being exposed to a lot more diversity in terms of the population of the classes or the groups that he's in, but he is not getting the Jewish holidays and the Shabbat experience. And my daughter she is looking for a new daycare experience for my grandson. But as she has looked in the area, she found one that has a wonderful reputation, and it's she said, "Mom, you're going to be so excited. It's a Jewish preschool." And when she explored it a little further, their not recommendations, but their requirements are that you have to have kosher food that you send with your child. And that was a turnoff to her. And no matter what I could do, just don't send the turkey that you send and just make it vegetarian, whatever. It was a turnoff. So that's a challenge. That's what I would say. It's a challenge.
It's a challenge. And we're about to talk about why parents make the choices that they make. And I think logistics is the largest reason. And that can be anything from Jewish holidays, having days off, to not having the right kind of turkey to be able to send. All of that is part of when parents make those choices. So I'm going to go back to screen sharing. Everyone can see that. Great. So in 2020, there was a large study within the Jewish community from an organization in DC, CASG, that said that families make decisions based on two specific pivotal moments. One is the birth of their first child, and the second is the child's entry into Jewish early childhood education. And what we saw is that at these two moments is when families create new patterns together. It's when they meet the most new other families, and when they start forming these patterns that become rituals and form opportunities for them to really know who their community is and to form relationships, and they end up raising children together. So we're excited to know that really there's deep research in the importance of this particular time frame. And when we think about why do young parents make the decisions that they do about early childhood, a lot of it is convenience. Parents do not want to drive very far to drop their child off at an early childhood daycare center. It includes the hours, the location, the cost, the kosher food, the holidays. All of these reasons have nothing to do with the programs being Jewish. They want the best thing for their child and the easiest care for them to achieve. And it doesn't matter what religion it is often, but they don't prioritize Jewish to drive 45 minutes each way because that's not what's best for them. One other thing I want to mention about here is a lot of our Jewish centers aren't full-day programs for accommodating two working parents. So that can be really tricky. Often a lot of our centers don't accommodate infants. And so when a family has that infant, they form a relationship with the center. And then that child gets older, they don't want to have that in two different centers, the Jewish center for the older child and potentially an infant center for a younger child. It makes it very logistically complicated. So families really are kind of prioritizing these factors. And I don't know if that's something that you see within your own children. We see the opportunities. We see parents are really involved with early childhood. They come in every day for drop off, for pickup. It's also a very vulnerable time for new parents. There's a lot of curiosities, questions. People are often very tired, and they are in partnership with the parent, with the teachers, and being able to say, my kid won't sleep. How do I potty train? They won't eat anything. Kind of, these aren't the questions that you ask a teacher in kindergarten or first grade. These are questions really about the physical well-being of a child, their emotional state, and who they are together as a family. How do I welcome a new baby? How do I deal with the death of a dog? Like all of these questions, they go to teachers for them. And having Jewish teachers means that you can have, and being in a Jewish school means that you can have Jewish answers to some of these questions. And as Jewish grandparents in their community, if you're not sending a child to a Jewish school, when there are moments in their lives, you can think about what would it mean to have, to bring Judaism into this moment of transition. We also know that there's a lot of challenges on the end of the Jewish early childhood programs. Currently in America, only 12 to 15% of Jewish young children are going to Jewish preschools. And I would say the largest reason why that is because our Jewish infrastructure exists in many neighborhoods where our young families can't afford. So it is really hard to send your child to a daycare or early childhood center that is far away when you are living in a house in a neighborhood that you can afford. So having cost be part of this larger conversation is essential. We know there's limited hours, those locations are fixed. I said limited infant care spots. And some of these centers, I know that JCC in New Jersey, they have a long wait list. And so because that and often siblings are at an advantage in that case. I want to share a quote with you from our dear friend, Mr. Rogers, as we think about why early childhood is such an important part of our young child's development. As human beings, our job in life is to help people realize how rare and valuable each one of us really is, that each of us has something that no one else has or ever will have, something inside of us that is unique to all time. It is our job to encourage each one to discover that uniqueness and to provide ways of developing its expression. So a few thoughts. What are some noticings about this quote? How does it relate to our conversation? Sorry, I'll call on you.
Okay, I'd like to respond to this because
Thanks, Sarah.
when you talk about human beings, as you mentioned before, a lot of this is logistics, and parents are under a lot of stress, 2 jobs, little babies, probably recently married within 4 or 5 years, and it's hard for them to learn about the uniqueness of each child. I'm sure they realize it, but do they have the time to develop its expression?
And I think one thing that's beautiful about that is that parents only know their child. They don't know how unique their child is compared to all children. And early childhood educators work with so many children, they can see that uniqueness in each child. That's really important. Sarah, thank you. I think that was really, really well said about also the busyness that parents feel. Sorry, I don't know if you'd actually like to jump in or not.
It's very nice of you to invite me. I just think this is one of the beautiful core Jewish values that that really helps create a beautiful environment that fosters appreciation of diversity in all people. So it makes my train of thought is I'm trying to figure out how I can help relate it to what we're doing now. I mean, it's one of the core things that I notice my grandchildren getting in their Jewish preschool, and it makes them act in the real world in a way that they have a special appreciation of nature, of animals, of other people, whether they look the same as them or they're different. And so I really appreciate this quote and this core Jewish belief.
Thank you. And core Jewish belief, me also being B'Tselem Elohim, we're all kind of created in the image of God. We all have a uniqueness within us. That's really beautiful, Suri. Thank you for letting me invite you to speak. So what is special about early childhood? These 5 years from birth to 5, when we're in an educational setting together, it's not just about cognitive and academic learning. It is about teaching the whole child. That is physical well-being, social well-being, emotional well-being, and cognitive well-being. All of those pieces are essential to how we think about who children are. Oftentimes, early childhood is a child's first experience in a group. That means they go from a setting with either a parent or a nanny where they're getting a lot of attention. Their needs are getting met, their voices are being heard, and then all of a sudden they're in a group with lots of other kids. How do I get attention? What about my idea? How do I give and take amongst others? So this is really important time for them to learn. Am I a leader or a follower? How can I try different things? What are my passions? What are my interests? Like, how do I get to play in the block area when it's always filled with the same 3 kids? I want to turn. All of that's happening in our young schools. It's also the times that children are learning what feelings mean. Is it okay to be angry? Is it okay to be mad? What are adults' expectations and reactions to my feelings? So children are learning how to identify those feelings, how other people respond to those feelings. I have here this feelings chart. You can see there's high energy with unpleasant and high energy that's pleasant. It's kind of above the vertical axis, and low energy unpleasant is sad, and low energy pleasant is just kind of how we can be calm on a day-to-day. I love this poster here. I use this in my classroom when I worked at Temple Beth Shalom in Needham, how I am a problem solver. And if I saw 2 children that were fighting or having a hard time kind of negotiating together, I'd say, okay, I had a ring of cards with 5 different pictures on it. I say, I see there's a problem here. How can we fix it? Do you want to negotiate? Want to stand up for yourself, walk away, ignore, or get help? And they would pick one, and then they'd act it out. And then I'd walk away and come back being like, did the problem get solved? Yes or no? Let's pick another one. And so these are the things that are crucial for our early childhood educators to be teaching, pieces that have to do with what it means to be a person in a world that's getting to know other people. How can they learn about themselves, about others, and about the world, and like fostering curiosity and wonder. I think one of the big buzzwords we hear is like, how do we raise a generation of resilient children, of kids who can try and fail and not get stuck all the time? And so part of what early childhood in these young years, what we have to do is give them those experiences to be able to work through things that are hard. And we live in a world that wants to coddle children a lot of the time. But I think part of what we're doing in our school settings is giving them those opportunities to take risks. And one thing I just want to share with this group is in birth through 5 before kindergarten, we're not giving kids worksheets. We're not doing ABCs and 1, 2, 3s or testing kids how well they can read or recite things. If they're reading, they're probably memorizing, and that's not showing what true learning looks like. Learning looks like asking questions and being curious and trying to understand the world around them. It doesn't look like rote memorization and filling out worksheets. We want to bring in the uniqueness of each child. And we hope that our schools are fostering that. This next slide I have is, this is just for you to look at some of my favorite feelings books. We're not going to go into them, but I wanted you to have them just in case. So we're going to dive into these 2 methods of learning, of Montessori and of Reggio. Both of these methods were developed in Italy right after World War II. Each municipality was given a sum of money to figure out how can we rebuild society in a time of destruction. And some was given to Maria Montessori, and the other was given to Lois Malaguzzi in the city of Reggio to be able to rebuild early childhood there. And these are both kind of buzzword early childhood phrases that you might hear. And they're actually very, very different from each other. But I really believe that there's no one way to teach young children as long as you're honoring the child. And there's really great ways that you can take from different philosophies to be able to support young children's growth and development. So something special about Montessori is it's mixed age groups. It's ages 2 to 6 in one room together, learning from kids of different ages. Something I love about that is how it could foster cousin relationships and children, sibling relationships, to be able to understand what it means to work with and interact with kids older and younger than you. There's only a few materials out. It's not chaos and busy everywhere with all the different toys. There really is specific toys that kids can access and reach at their own level. And children are responsible for cleaning up. And so that's one of the things that I really want to emphasize about Montessori is actually what they call their practical life skills curriculum. In many schools, there's an area for blocks, there's an area for dramatic play or art. In Montessori schools, there is a table for practical life skills. And 2-year-olds will sit and they will zest oranges, or they'll pour different water from one thing to another thing, or pour it into a filter and watch it go. They will use how to rinse out or squeeze out a sponge or wipe down a table. They're actually playing what skills they could use in real life. And what they're also doing is developing fine motor skills. They're developing responsibility, and they're exploring these opportunities to take care of themselves and take care of their environment around them. So I have a niece who went to a secular Montessori school, and I'm going to share a little bit about her very first day. Hopefully you can all...
Hold on a second. Adeline is going to tell us about one of the big projects she did at school today, which was her first full big day at school when she had lunch for the first time at Seton Montessori. Okay, Adeline, tell us what you did.
I was done with my playground. It was dirty, and so I first washed it in soapy water, then I washed it in clean water, then I punched it like I washed it with a brush. Then I put something that you could put plates in. And I did open makeup without help and with nobody showing me.
Wow, that's crazy. Did you...
Welcome to my niece. She is now 8. One thing I just love about that is just her pride. I did it all by myself with nobody showing me. And how great it is to foster that. She's 3. She's really little. But when we see that children are capable and we give them opportunities to do things by themselves, they instill in them a sense of confidence. And that is something that doesn't have to just live in school. That can be a partnership between grandparents and parents and kids to work together to help that children are feeling competent and are being responsible in ways and learning these skills at a young age. So some of our Montessori takeaways is to cook with your grandchildren and to let them do things alongside of you. I must say, it might take a little longer. Like, get prepared for, they might go away and then come back. Sometimes doing a project from beginning to end in one sitting with a toddler doesn't work, and that's okay. You can put a project down, go somewhere else and play, and then come back to it. Just put it back in the refrigerator while you can. Let them use real cooking tools. Here you see a child using a peeler for a vegetable. There are lots of child-friendly Montessori peelers and knives for vegetables that you can buy on Amazon. If you search like Montessori real tools, children, like you will find a whole world of different kitchen utensils that are made for toddlers, and practice skills together. And I think that this is a really fun way to bond with the child, because it's not just you playing with their toys, but it's them supporting you, getting ready for a meal or getting ready for guests coming over, just being together in a house that they get to see and partner with you in how you live. And one thing that is also that we can take from Montessori is children have designated space to play. I know sometimes kids can come over and they can take everything out and run around this. Where's their section? Could you lay out a towel? These are the 3 things that they can pick from, and they can play with those toys on that towel. And that's kind of like a designated way to bring in the Montessori methods, particularly if they're used to it, into your setting. And so Reggio Emilia is a really different philosophy. It's taking what kids are interested in and building upon it to be able to create long 2 to 3 month curriculum that kids are going in depth with. Let me explore space through art and science and all the different ways that kids can explore. So part of it is that learning is emergent. In a Reggio classroom, they won't do the same curriculum from year to year. In Montessori, you have the same toys out, they practice, they gain skills, they continue. Reggio, it's like, what's going on in the world today? Maybe this year they're talking about elections and polls and how do people have preferences and how do you voice, and like, I'm making this up, but like they're taking what's happening in the world and they're bringing it to a child level. So questions guide exploration, and really children's voices are valued. A lot of times there's a big value of documentation for educators where they're writing down what kids are saying and they're reflecting on it at another time. And I think that that can be really special for grandparents to do, of like, oh, last week we talked about dinosaurs. This week, like went to the library and I got this book about dinosaurs. Maybe we could draw some pictures from it or explore a concept or go to a museum. That's kind of the building of an emergent curriculum. And something which I think is really interesting about Reggio is that sometimes when we're talking about dinosaurs, we're talking about dinosaurs. But sometimes when we're talking about dinosaurs, we're talking about big body movements and loud noises and scary things. Sometimes we're talking about things that are long ago and we don't understand them, or that they're dead and they don't exist anymore. And how do I manage all those thoughts as a kid? So I think sometimes when we think about what kids are interested in, we often put it in like a box of content and we don't see all those other pieces. But in Reggio, all the voices of how children are thinking about are valued. And so the Reggio philosophy has this poem that is kind of a cornerstone of how they think about children, that children have 100 languages. So I'm just going to read the bolded parts, but I invite you to look at this on your own. The child is made of 100. The child has 100 languages, 100 hands, 100 thoughts, 100 ways of playing, of speaking, but they steal 99. The school and the culture. They separate the head from the body. They tell the child to discover the world already there, and of the 100 they steal 99. They tell the child that work and play and reality and fantasy, science and imagination, sky and earth, reason and dreams are things that do not belong together. And thus they tell the child the 100 is not there, and the child says, no way, the 100 is there. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. I'm curious what your initial thoughts are of that poem. It might be new to some of you. Shelley, can I pick on you to share your thoughts on it? And then we'll go to Marcia.
Thank you for letting me speak. I've heard this poem before, and every time I hear it, it amazes me over and over again how often I forget, as an early childhood educator and as a grandparent, how many ways children are trying to express themselves through everything they do. And we often forget that, whether it's manipulating small characters or it's getting into the mud. Each one of those materials that children are exploring and feeling are all the different ways that they're trying to express what's going on internally, what they're seeing, all the questions that you talked about in terms of dinosaurs. How do I think about the world? So the more materials and the more interesting materials, both natural materials and things we find around the house that we give children an opportunity to just explore and build with, where they're open-ended and children can make anything they want from it, the more we're giving them an expressive outlet. And I think it's good for all of their social well-being, their cognitive learning. So this poem really, I love this poem so much.
Thanks, Shelley. Marcia.
Yeah, I took a job as a kindergarten teacher. I was not trained in education, but in New York City, if you had advanced degrees, you could teach in the private school system. And I took the job as a kindergarten teacher because I didn't know if I liked children. I didn't know if I wanted children. And so I had no expectation at all. I had no thesis to prove. And my background was in the arts. So for me, what I learned from children was to be in the moment with them, with no agenda, with no expectation. It was really like improvisational theater. And I loved every second of the year that I was with those children. And I've since gone on to create programs and products for children. And and now I'm a grandparent, and I'm a grandparent with Holocaust background, with a stepson who identifies sort of kind of like Jewish. His wife is not religious at all, but the grandchildren went to a Jewish preschool to JCC. And again, with no expectation to be in the moment. Now they're preteens, and and they go to a Jewish they go to a Jewish camp, which is one of the big identifiers to have, Jewish heritage in the family. They know their grandfather has Holocaust background. And it's kind of like a Paisley puzzle that keeps reforming itself in a very beautiful way. I mean, I think my grandson is a profound ethicist. He's 11 years old. To me, that's a deeply Jewish value that arose because, I don't know, is beautiful.
Beautiful. That idea of being present, when we think about how busy children's lives are and parents' lives are, how we're constantly on devices and this ping and that thing, and to be able to give the gift as a grandparent, to be present and to honor their uniqueness and to follow it and to hone it, and to listen to the languages that they're trying to say to you, even if they're not in words, if they're in the language of blocks or trains or whatever it may be. They're communicating and they want to know that you can connect with them about that. So that's a beautiful thing to take away from this, if nothing else. Okay, let's hop back in. Great. So Shelley shared some beautiful reflections about like loose parts and open-ended play. And we think of that as one of kind of the core values of the Reggio philosophy. You can see here in the top picture that there's a child who's exploring with nature items and just making things. It's not that, oh, what are you drawing? Oh, what are you making? They're just exploring with shells and with leaves and some dried fruit, and they're making ephemeral art. They're exploring shapes, they're exploring textures, they're exploring physics. And that's an activity to young kids. We don't always have to use our words to get them to say what they're doing and why they're doing it. We can also just be present, like Marcia shared, and just let them create and sit with them and maybe even create something yourself and be present with them in that moment. I love also this. I was the assistant director at Central Synagogue, and one of the projects that the kids did is they created their own graduation moving up ceremony, the pre-K kids. So they made this background so that they could take photos for Instagram with their parents. And they had this big, beautiful piece of art that they worked on for weeks. So it's a little bit of project-based learning, but something that we do is process art and what it means to use recycled materials. You can collect egg cartons and paper towel rolls and cardboard boxes and have them over with a roll of tape with a 3-year-old, and they'll have such a blast. Let them explore, let them color boxes. We got a new trash can recently that has been, the boxes inside of it has been so fun for toddlers in our household. All of these things are really great ways to just explore and play together. So collecting on interests, exploring process art, and going on nature walks and collecting things and making art about things. All of that is kind of based on the Reggio philosophy. So some of our takeaways that we have from both of these philosophies is children are capable and that behavior is communication. So when we think about when we're seeing behavior that could look challenging, behavior that we don't quite know why they're acting that way, think about how you can connect with that child. That behavior is communication, and so we can connect rather than correct. And that's a thing that can be very hard. We often talk about sit-ins, not time-outs, where people will sit together. Oftentimes kids just need something to refocus on. Oftentimes kids are behaving in ways that are unexpected because they're hungry or tired or there's been too many transitions. So we have to think about that whole child and what their needs are before we're scolding children or punishing them for behaviors. Children need open-ended opportunities, and that confidence is built with risk. This is a school in the Boston area, and that is a real hammer. It's a real hammer with some golf tees and a pumpkin. This is an awesome fine motor project. I know the other thing they did after they played with this pumpkin is they took rubber bands and they made shapes all over the pumpkin. What a delightful, inexpensive, really fun activity where kids can focus for a long period of time. So I think it's really nice. I want to keep going. So some Jewish takeaways is we can let kids help with food prep. We can give children a place to play during large family gatherings, having kind of a side space and be like, this is designated for you. This is your play place. And let children bring in their ritual objects that they make in early childhood centers, that they can light their menorah, they can use their Kiddush cup or Elijah's cup at the Seder. If there's something that they made in school, they can put it on the table if it's Shabbat or another holiday, and to find ways in a developmentally appropriate way for the children to be involved in ritual. They feel competent, they feel connected, so think about what ways that they can be involved. So I want to take a few minutes. We're going to bridge now from what's happening in the classroom kind of to the field as a whole. So I'm curious if there are any surprises or things that are resonating with you from learning about those two philosophies. Should keep going? Okay, we'll keep going.
I want to say one thing.
Sure.
I think it is so important for the adults who are with children to always remember that the process is what is important. And the communicating and being with the child and having the child doing whatever the child wants to do, and the adult grandparent being present with the child without asking questions and letting the child take the time to do what they want to express.
It's so valuable, and there are so few places that children can exist without that external pressure. So for a grandparent to be the safe place that they can just draw and create and explore without all the questions and the ideas, it really can be so freeing to kids. It's a way of letting them kind of be in their childhood. Thank you. So the state of the field. So really, I come to this work because I connect with early childhood educators on the national level. And we're seeing this post-COVID world as really a pivotal moment in the early childhood landscape. We know that our teachers who are supporting our youngest learners, who are creating these environments that are socially responsive and that are really creating physical care for young kids, those educators are really doing physically, emotionally demanding work, and they are still getting paid abysmal wages. And even in our Jewish centers, not all our early childhood educators have health insurance. They are wiping the noses of snotty grandchildren all day long, and they do not have health insurance in many, many of our schools. And it's challenged in our society that even after all these years and lots of conversations about what the field of childcare looks like, there's still a lack of respect. And it's really hard to graduate college, go into early childhood, and spend your entire life as a teacher, and to really be able to live comfortably. And it's something that we know is vitally important for an educator to be able to do, but also that the work they're doing in our early childhood centers is really crucially important. So the work that we see in Elevated, this is actually very recent data of the new teachers that are entering the field within the past 2 years. This is kind of some data of about 100 emerging educators from 5 different cities around the country. We see that most are young, about 47%, but we also know that 15% are over 50, that they're having a career change. And it's that percentage, which are actually Jewish people who are entering the field later in their life. 55% of our early childhood educators do not have a bachelor's degree. So they have a GED or an associate's degree and not a bachelor's. And if they have a bachelor's degree, that there's only probably 1 in 3 of those have that degree in early childhood education. We're noticing a diversity of race, that about 1 out of 3 educators are a person of color, and 1 out of 3 of educators have a first language other than English. And the one that we really noticed that we talked about with Tampa is that 55% of our early childhood educators teaching Jewish children are not Jewish. And this is a statistic that really shocks many people because we're creating Jewish community in those centers. And part of the work that I'm doing through Elevated is to really bring Judaism to our teachers so that they can bring it to our students. Any thoughts or reflections on this slide? Yeah, Marilee?
Yeah, so I'm not clear. Are we talking about the educators in general or educators in Jewish schools?
Educators in Jewish schools. Thanks for clarifying. So these are educators actually in Jewish schools who've been selected to be part of the Elevated Year of Learning program that are coming into our program and learning with my organization about what it means to be an early teacher. So we're noticing kind of these demographic shifts, and part of what I do as someone who's invested in the early childhood community is run trainings for teachers about how to teach young children, and I connect with other curricular partners of how do we bring Judaism, how do we bring child development to our new teachers who are getting hired into our communities, because there's also a big shortage of teachers. I think the slide got a little bit out of order, and I apologize for that. Oh, Meredith, you want to hop in first?
Yes, so I'm curious to know, how is that different, all those statistics different from a decade or 2 or 3 decades ago?
That's a really important question. I think one of the biggest changes that has happened in the past few decades is that our programs went from part-day programs from 9 to 1 with a stay-at-home parent to full-day programs for 2 working parents that go really from 8 till 6 p.m. And we often had many Jewish parents and grandparents who wanted part-time work. They wanted to be able to work in an early childhood center until 1. They would go home, they'd be able to pick up their kid from school, and they'd be able to be present as parents and grandparents later in the day. And that has completely changed. A lot of those people left during COVID, if not before, and really the needs of early childhood centers, they need more hours and they need more coverage in full-time care. And there's fewer Jewish people who really want to work from 9 to 4 or 5 p.m. in early childhood care for that particular wage that is often happening. Sharon.
So under full disclosure, I don't even have grandchildren yet. I just keep hoping. But anyway, I will say one thing just in response to what was said previously is what I know about watching my parents with my kids is the time and the ability to be right there with them is so important. So if everybody forgets everything else, like do that, like be there with the children, because the parents have to do the laundry and make the dishes. So that's number one. But I want to go back to the last slide because my daughter was in early childhood and just switched from public pre-K in New Orleans, which is really challenging, to Jewish day school and in kindergarten, and took a pretty significant pay cut and less vacation days by virtue of doing that. So what's your answer to this problem that you can't get teachers, yet the teachers' pay is abysmal and healthcare is non-existent and all that? So what's the answer?
What's the answer? I think one of the answers to this larger question is that more people just need to know that it's a challenge. Elevated as an organization is funded by 3 national family foundations and 12 local grants from each of the 12 cities that are a part of it. So part of what we are doing is we're continually speaking and writing and sharing out about the importance of this work. And we want communities to understand that this is vitally essential for young children's identity, for family engagement, and just the future of society as a whole. Shelley Hoppin. Shelley's one of our community coordinators in Long Island alongside Surrey, which is why I've called on them multiple times in this presentation.
But I wanted to mention to everyone that there is a national organization called Shema Kolenu, which means hear our voices, for early childhood educators to learn how to become advocates in their communities, to access funding and all kinds of resources for their early childhood centers. Many centers can access public funding, and how to be an advocate, how to speak to parents, grandparents about the dearth of teachers, about the low salary. And so this is really important that we have to train teachers and early childhood educators who by their nature sometimes aren't the ones who want to be so advocate, be advocates, how to be advocates. And one of the things we each had to do was explore for each of our states what funding is out there and how much money is going to support early childhood educators and families. Are there subsidies that families can access? So this is really important for Jewish early childhood educators to know what's really available to them.
It could be that there's a community of other grandparents at your synagogue or JCC that want to invest in this particular subject of advocacy. Local and state governments are really thinking about different types of public pre-K and supporting grants specifically for teacher salaries that Jewish schools can still access. There was a lot of that post-COVID, and it really is an incredible gift to our schools to be able to have that public assistance. Marcia, then Nancy and Isaac.
Yeah, I have a question. Sometimes, being affiliated with a synagogue can be very expensive. And I'm wondering if, given the current political climate that we're living in, if you have many Jewish families who are seeking a more Jewish community educational environment for their children, but they can't afford to be affiliated with a synagogue. And I'm just curious about, are you experiencing any of that mix?
So I think that one piece that's interesting about early childhood Jewish education is it's not picking between, like in kindergarten, like free versus private. Like it's either daycare at Bright Horizons or kindercare or early childhood at the synagogue. Like all of these are incredibly expensive to parents, and our Jewish centers are not really beyond the market price for what it means to have full-time care for a young child. What it then does is it creates a connection to the community. And I would say most of our synagogues, if you ask for a discount on membership, they want to make things work for families. Particularly our young families in our early childhood centers. There are some synagogues that actually offer free membership for families in the early childhood center. Or if you're a member of the synagogue, you get a discount to the early childhood. Like there's different ways that they do that. Sometimes you get free kindergarten in the religious school if you're a graduate of the preschool, because then they get them ongoing connected to the religious school. These are models that we're exploring, and then my organization's helping to connect with leadership of different congregations because they don't want to lose those young families. Those young families are the future of our Jewish community. We need them. So being able to think about kind of outside the box models that are both financially sustainable for communities and supportive to families is really a key thing that we're working on moving forward. Thank you. Nancy and Isaac. You guys are still on mute, but we want to hear you. Perfect. Oh, you're still on mute.
I was wondering if there was any effort to recruit men for early education in Jewish schools. I mean, decades ago, of course, the cliche women elementary school, men high school, but I mean, I taught elementary school, and the importance of having a male mentor early, I think, is of value to children. I'm just wondering if that's a factor.
If I could write a dissertation, I would do it this exact topic. I think that we could completely change society if we had more men teaching young children, and it is something I am personally extremely passionate about. We have no community-wide initiative that is making this something that is happening. However, we do know that I think we have 12 men enrolled in Elevated right now, which we have 12 different communities. We have about 200 educators, and more I'm seeing a lot of men particularly who left college mid-COVID. Jewish men who left college mid-COVID are trying to figure out what to do with their lives. They have found connective and community and well-being working at a Jewish early childhood center. And I don't know if it's long-term, but they're finding a home in that place right now. The other thing where we're finding significant men joining is that there's actually a Jewish Learning Service Corps in Denver, Colorado, that supports the training of seniors and retirees to become like licensed substitute teachers and to work in Jewish early childhood centers in a cohort-based community. And they are seeing 30 to 50% men per cohort. So we're seeing this as a later in life way of exploring teaching and substitutes rather than or earlier on. But I think that is not a Jewish initiative, the Early Learning Service Corps. It is specific to Denver, but it is critically important. It's really, really something that I think every community could have. So going specifically of how we can support, that was a great segue, thank you, of how grandparents can support their schools. So I hope that some of you live close to your grandchildren, some of you live far away, but any chance you have to make a connection to the teacher, if you happen to be in town, to do pickup and to just say thank you and to say what's going on in your classroom. If there's any emails that you can say, like ask your child if they could send a picture or two of what's happening in the school, get to know what's going on. If you have an opportunity to visit once a year, you could read a book or share a story or do a cooking project. And I think knowing that there's a lot of non-Jewish teachers teaching in Jewish schools, that you can be a Jewish voice. What does it mean to bring in like your grandparents' regular recipe to a school, to show pictures of your extended family, to be able to kind of bring these traditions into the classroom in a new way. And really, like, anyone here to reach out to a local early childhood center, whether or not it's a place where your grandparent goes, like they are welcoming to substitutes. Anyone who'd want to spend a little bit of time reading into a classroom or spending some time at a Shabbat, teachers are out a lot, and really being a substitute or a volunteer at a classroom is often very welcomed from an early childhood director. There's an organization called Ideal 18, and they've created Grand Friends networks where they're really focusing on intergenerational relationships with the group of with different people of different generations, and not just doing kind of surface level things, learning about traditions, cooking, doing really in-depth projects and getting to know each other and building relationships together over a period of time. And then also what Shelley said of advocating for the programs in your community, spreading the word, getting involved with Shema Kolenu, trying to find a way to connect to this issue as something that we know is critically important for children and their families. And my last slide that I want to share is a little bit about our organization. I know I've shared some along the way, but so Elevated is a new partnership. We're just 18 months old, and our whole goal is to uplift early childhood Jewish educators and their communities, to really engage with those teachers and to say to the world, they are doing incredible, incredible work, and we all need to honor it as they raise our children in partnership with us. So we have 3 national partners: the JCC Association North America, the Union for Reform Judaism, and Jewish Federations of North America. And we're working with 3 national funders, Jim Joseph, Crown Family Philanthropies, and Samuels. Our 12 communities, oh my gosh, if I can do this quickly: Long Island, Boston, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Atlanta, Miami, Houston, Denver, Boulder, St. Louis, Chicago, Seattle, East Bay of San Francisco. So if you heard your name on the list, thank you. Sorry for those arms. Those are places where we're working now, and places where we have community coordinators on the ground who are helping really kind of galvanize the early childhood communities in those ways. We have 2 of our community coordinators here, as I said. And so we've worked with about 300 emerging educators where that data comes from. They have a mentorship program, and we have 705 total educators in our program, including directors. So you can see on the top, we have a group of wonderful directors from Long Island, and at the bottom here is our director in the middle, Orna Siegel, who's speaking at the JFNA conference, really sharing about Jewish families today. So I've actually included a few other slides about Elevated in the presentation beyond what I'm sharing with you today, but if you want to look and learn more, oh, this is many slides, it is there for you to look at in the PDF as I click through all of that. But I am here to answer any questions about early childhood, about grandparents' roles, about Elevated, and about how we can support our youngest learners in our community who are so important to the future of Jewish life. So thank you all, and I open it up to questions.
Could I jump in, Sasha, and ask you if our grandparent community would like to get involved with Elevated and to see how they might contribute? What's the best way for us to go about that?
So you are welcome to follow Elevated on Facebook. Our page is at Elevated Together. I really think one of the ways that Elevated is unique is that we really operate on the local level, even though we're a national organization. So please, I think, Terry, if you could put my email on the chat, reach out to me. I'd love to be able to connect you to a community coordinator locally, or if there's a particular interest that you have. I know many of the early childhood centers in most communities across America. And if you'd like to get connected to someone who's local to you, I'm happy to make a connection if you're interested in something specific. If it's connecting with a director or substituting or teaching, there's a lot of really excellent centers that are really welcoming new voices and interest in their communities. Thank you for putting my email in the chat. Carrie and then Karen.
Sure. So I don't know that if this is tangential to Elevated, but what can we do, or who are the right people to help us do this, to encourage our Jewish early childhood centers to try to frame what their restrictions or obstacles, as they may appear to other people, could be in a way that makes it feel more open and inclusive rather than exclusionary?
You mean in terms of hours and wait lists and things?
Well, for example, rather than saying kosher food only, what if, but I meant this is restrictive in a different way, what if the framing were no meat, please send your children with food that with no meat or no pork or no shellfish. I mean, just, I don't know how to suggest it, but we want to try to find ways to remove any barriers from entry to our interfaith families, or even our two Jewish couple families who are cautiously looking at the restrictions or boundaries.
Yeah, I talked also to a community today that their website said regular hours 9 to 1, like extended hour. And I was like, regular? Like, who wants to be not regular? Like, who is sending their child from 9 to 1? What does this regular hours mean? And so I think our early childhood community, I would say most of our directors are wonderful people. They love connecting with children and teachers and parents, but they're not trained in some of these operational pieces. And Elevate is working really hard to partner with the directors to think about their website and their marketing and how they're sharing about things for family enrollment and for teacher recruitment. And so we have a year-long curriculum for those directors. I think that kind of question would come up, but we're not directly talking about that question. We're talking about how do you create a welcoming admissions experience or a tour or any of those pieces. So that is part of the work we're doing, Carrie. Karen.
So first of all, thank you. You are a wonderful presenter, and thank you all the other people who spoke up, truly. I think one topic I feel like we didn't hit is how we as grandparents best support our kids who are supporting raising their children. And I have grandchildren, I mentioned, in 2 different families, and they are very close to each other, yet they have very different styles of how to raise their kids, both in terms of Jewishness and many other things. One has the child has to stay at the table while they're eating, the other one can wander the house while they're eating, just as a silly example. And I get some joy as a grandparent in charging myself with best supporting how that family does it. Not denying who I am, not a gag order on myself, but going out of my way to say, how can I best support their choices? And I think that applies also to the Jewishness in the home, whether it's preschool or not preschool, or Hanukkah or not Hanukkah, or the more minor holidays, or Shabbat dinners or not, that sort of thing. And I just wondered your perspective on that piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I think we have to meet people exactly where they are. And Karen, I think you're really doing, it's hard. And it's hard also when you have them together to be able to honor both those practices within the same space. But as we think about with teaching children, I think that that's really important. And maybe even naming with your children, like, I want to make a place where both of you feel comfortable having your child have dinner at my house. And I want to follow your rules and your rules. Like, what is the best way for us to all do this together? And talking about that. I think it's really important, and I'm glad that you raise it. And I actually want to swing over to Terry. Terry, what is your next session with the Jewish Grandparents Network? Don't you have a session coming up about working with adult children?
We do. This is not a setup, and you know how I know I don't have it ready to put in chat. Sarah, help. Go find the link, put it in chat. We do. On March the 18th, we have a parenting expert talking to us about how to get along with our adult children. We'll put the link in chat before you leave.
So my space is the early childhood classroom, but connections with parents, it's coming up. So thank you, Karen, for that wonderful segue. Any other last questions?
Yeah, any last questions? Then we will wrap up because we're approaching time.
Thanks for putting that in the chat, Sarah.
Navigating a relationship with your adult children. I think we all need that. I'm just guessing.
It's tricky. Well, thank you all. It was so nice to talk with you and to hear your stories. And I'm really grateful for your time and curiosity about this subject. Please feel free to reach out and to email me with any questions about early childhood or schools or parenting. I love being a resource. And that's really my job, is to be a resource to early childhood questions in our community. So thank you to all of you and to the Jewish Grandparents Network for hosting this webinar.
Sarah, don't put her back, spotlight her. So what I did was, when Karen last spoke, I wrote like on my grocery list here what Karen said. She said, "You're a wonderful presenter, and thank you to everyone who spoke up." And I couldn't have said it better. You are a wonderful presenter. It was so informative. And I think you just gave us insights. You provoked our thinking. And I especially want to thank you or our grandparent community for your exquisite investment in your grandchildren. I just found this whole session exhilarating. Thank you to all of you for joining us. Sarah, thanks for your technical support and expertise. And I appreciate your being here, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.